Hi there, Ashley Ritter here. And today I just want to do a really casual video about strategic networking. It likely will be close to 10 minutes. So, the first thing I really want to start off with is just how normal this is to do. I think so many of us feel like we're doing something wrong or we're asking for a favor somehow if we're talking to someone about our career or their career. And the first thing is to really just get in the right mindset that this is not a strange thing to do, a strange thing to ask. It is not transactional. It's human, right? We spend so much of our days working. So why wouldn't we want to talk to another human about working? So I really want to just put it in that frame to start. So that's number one. Number two, I want us to understand the different kinds of networking and what the purpose is. Okay. So we've really got I'm going to break it up really in two different types. There's exploratory networking, also called prototyping networking. And then there's also directed networking or networking that maybe has a bit of a clearer purpose involved. And so I'm going to talk about those two different types. In both of them, though, it's always important to kind of go in having a sense of what you're hoping for, right? What is the why are you actually reaching out for this person? And again, I want to encourage it doesn't need to be a transactional purpose. So it's not something like, well, I hope to get a job at this place. And so that's what I'm hoping for, right? It's actually, you just want to have in the back of your mind, like, what is the kind of a backdrop of your reaching out so that you can be aware of what you're hoping to gain from the conversation. Sometimes it is networking into the organization and understanding, if you could kind of get in, but it's also connected to things like understanding the nature of the culture of the organization or the potential roles you might fit. Um, so it's really to there's not just a transactional reason. There's usually a few reasons, but you want to be clear on what they are for yourself before going into a call. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about exploratory versus directed. So exploratory is going to be if you're someone who's thinking to yourself, I just don't know what's out there. I've been in this same field for a period of time. I need to really kind of like break it up, get new ideas. If you've worked with me one on one, then I like to call this like the diverging process, or like where you're kind of breaking up concrete to see the actual soil that's underneath. And so you need to create new ways of thinking for yourself. So this could be when you reach out to folks and you're really open and honest about the fact that you're in a place where you're trying to get new ideas and you really are just hopeful to hear more about their work. And usually on those kind of calls, you can be transparent about, or you want to spend some time getting clarity about, what you do know and what you don't know. A lot of people feel afraid that they're going to look silly or look like they don't know what they're talking about. But that's honestly not true. I've never met another human being who hasn't at times wondered what other careers are like. And so I think um, going into the call, you can, take time to organize your thoughts around what you do know about yourself, but really organize questions that you want to ask that you don't know. And so there's ways you can go about doing that where you, again, don't seem like you're quote all over the place, which side note isn't a bad thing, but you are directed in what you're trying to learn, or at least you're clear on what you're trying to learn. Okay, now let's talk about directed networking is what I'm calling it, but you could call it a lot of different things. It may be more networking where you have created some clarity around what you're looking for. You know that you're trying to get into, you know, X, Y, and Z company, and you know that this person is working at X company and there's a position open. So you're really trying to, see if this works. That kind of networking is going to really depend on, where, do you know the person or do you not? Have you met them before? Are they an alum? And so the way you approach that is going to be a little bit more open with, I like to be really thoughtful before I enter an application process. I like to be really thoughtful before I enter a search. And so I just wanted to get some insight from you because I am considering this particular role at such and such at your company, and I'd like to make sure I'm clear on whether I'd be a good fit before I jump in. Right? So then you're pretty open and directed that you're actually going for something in the company. So those are the two different kind of types. I'm sure it actually probably isn't as binary. You could really do a continuum there, but if we were to really bucket them out, that's how I like to think about it. Now, let's talk about, where do you start? How do you go about this, right? Like, how do you think about, if you know you need to do some of this, where do you begin? I like to think of circles, and you've probably heard people talk about first, second, and third degree connections. I like to think of that just a little differently, just to kind of help us frame this out relationally. So if you were to sit down with a piece of paper, hopefully you've got one right now, and you draw a circle and you think, okay, who really is just in my corner and wants to see me win in life? Who are the champions who just believe in me? Right? This may actually be people who aren't in your same industry. It may be, a previous mentor or a close friend. It can be people who just really believe in you. Okay. So that inner circle, you want to think of 3 to 5 people who you can be really honest with about what's going on. So if you're launching a search and you know you're launching a search, and maybe you're doing it quietly, maybe you're not ready to let your employer know that, you may tell these people, hey, it's time for me to take a leap, and I'm hoping to do that in the next 3 to 6 months. I'm starting to let people, my inner networks, know. I know we don't talk about work very much, but I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more. I'd love to tell you what I'm looking for, and if there's anyone you think I should speak with, or anyone you may know who you think would be a good fit for me to talk to. Right. So that's kind of where you start there. It's real honest, real open. You don't want to spend 50 minutes talking about your terrible, boss. It really is thinking about the future, not necessarily droning on and on and on about the past. That's often what people will do. That's a pitfall of networking, and you just want to avoid it. You want to be thinking about who you're going to be apart from the things that you're departing from. So that's the inner circle. Then, if you were to draw a secondary circle around that, your secondary circle may be people who you would consider acquaintances. Maybe they're not like a buddy you'd go have a drink with, but maybe they are someone who, you've known from afar for several years. You've been in a similar industry, or maybe there's a conference every year that you usually would greet each other at, or maybe they are a friend of a friend. So again, a looser connection, but like someone who you know. So this may not be someone you would reach out to say, "Oh, hey, I've got to get out of my job. I got to move on." You may have a little bit more of a distance in how you present the scenario, but they might be really interested in being thoughtful and helpful to you. Now, let me say, this second degree circle is actually one of the most powerful you have in your network. There's actually research that's shown that those looser ties can be more effective for you. On some level, it's because they know that if they know of you from afar, they know you're a distant connection. They have no reason necessarily to feel to either block you or to be super invested. They can just be helpful, right? Oh, sure, I don't mind, mentioning to my supervisor that you're considering our team. Oh, sure, I don't mind, connecting you to so and so. It's on some level, it's a low risk engagement for them, and so you know really remember that those second degree ties can be really useful. So with the second degree or the second circle, I encourage you to think of 5 to 10 people, specific people who you just maybe appreciate, you value what they value. Maybe you see them on LinkedIn and you know that they share things that seem similar to your value system. Or maybe these are people who seem to really like their jobs and like where they work. And maybe you say, I really admire how much you seem, dedicated to your workplace. I'd love to grab a cup of coffee and just hear more about it. I'm thinking about a transition, and I know that I'm clear on my strengths, but I'd like to use them in a different capacity. Could I, spin some ideas off of you? Right? People are often very open to that. And then that third degree connection. The third degree is going to be a looser tie. It's usually someone you don't know. Maybe that's someone who's connected you to someone, or someone else connects you to someone else. Often these third degree may be in your alumni network, or it might be a cold ask. So your alumni network is actually really great. If you haven't gotten on to LinkedIn to use this trick, please do it today. It's something that's open source. You can go on to any alma mater and you can actually click their page and you can go to the alumni tab and you can toggle through that information in whatever way you would like. So you can look at where they live, where they work, what they do, what they studied. This is a really good way to just get new ideas of where you may even be interested in looking. So, for example, if you know that you have interest in, I don't know, XYZ company, and you look on your alma mater page, you can actually search, is anyone there at that company, right? So that's going to be much more directed than exploratory, right? Because you're not necessarily trying to figure out what you're interested in your life and career with that person. You're trying to say, I think I want to work here. I'd love to have a cup of coffee to learn more about your experience at the company. Those are two different things. So again, part of what you want to create for yourself is almost like a map, right? So if you're about to launch your search, you want to have a sense of a map of who are my people in my corner. And I even encourage people to make not just people in your networking corner, but like an encouragement team. So like have two or three friends you can call when you're in this search process with, in tears or feeling frustrated or upset, because sometimes the process does make you feel like, gosh, am I going to find a fit? Is anyone, going to see my strengths and what I'm good at doing? It can be discouraging, especially if you're ghosted by a recruiting process. So make sure you have people to encourage you. That's just a little side note. But yes, you want to look at and map out, okay, who are my people who are in my corner? Who are those secondary folks who I've kind of been in the same spaces with, and I'd like to get to know them more. I think they may have more to share with me. And then the third degree, perhaps alums or other connections at companies you may have interest in, or fields you may have interest in. So that's just a little bit of a landscape. And by the time you do that, hopefully you've come up with anywhere between 5 and 20 people that you can have conversations with. The reason I really, 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 really encourage this is because I think so often we this process is vulnerable. It just is. We have to acknowledge that. And it's so much less vulnerable to like click an easy apply button behind a computer screen at 2 a.m. when no one's looking and you can just hope, well, maybe if it works out, then great, it was meant. If it doesn't, oh well, right? And that's great. There's nothing wrong with doing that. We all have done that. I think it's good to just kind of practice that every now and again. But if you do that over and over again, you're building up sort of this expectation for rejection in the process, and you also aren't having that real human contact to talk about what you may or may not be interested in as it relates to your career. I always tell people, if you are filling out applications cold online, you can kind of expect a penny back. If you're having a human conversation, you can expect $1, right? So which way are you going to yield more results? Obviously the human conversation, but it does take more energy, right? It does take time and focus. And so, you also don't want to run yourself in the ground by scheduling 10 calls in a week. You have to pace yourself and really be thoughtful about where am I ready to spend that energy? Who makes the most sense to talk to first? And where do I find myself a little excited perhaps to talk to a particular person in a particular field? Um, Obviously none of us love those like first time interactions, or at least I'll say very few of us love those first time interactions. And so I encourage you before having the calls just to remind yourself, like, you're allowed to be human, you're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to not know the answers. If one thing I'm so appreciative of in my coaching practice is that I get reinforced every day that all of us really are searching for more answers in our life. That's part of what life is. It's a learning process. So really embrace that. And then again, prior to the call, and if you're working with me one on one, you probably have done this. It's so important to have a sense of, you know, how do I describe the target that I'm going after? And if I don't know that answer, it's okay to not know. It's okay to say to yourself, okay, I have some of the answers, but not all of them. So, how can I formulate a little nutshell about me? Here's what I do know. I know that I am really strong with blank. I know I thrive in situations like blank. I know that I do really well when this happens, and that these are some of my key strengths and background areas that I know I've thrived in. Now I'm just looking to translate it into something that looks a little different. What are some of the ideas you may have? Tell me what your workplace is like. Tell me what you really like about it. What's a really hard day look like? Um, what are some things you would tell someone before going into this type of work? So, those are just a few primers to get you going on your networking process. Hopefully, this brief video gave you some of what you need to get started. You can always email thoughts and questions to info@chicagocareerconsulting.com. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Oh, one last note: when you're doing this, get yourself a cup of tea or something. Do something to help yourself relax when you're really focusing on this networking map, because we need reminders that it's going to be okay. So, here's my reminder to you today. It's going to be okay. Just take one step at a time. All right, thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.